think first and foremost, you must be seen to be respected. I see you, you are here, acknowledgement. That's the most basic form of respect, I believe. Um, I'm very much if I walk by someone I know, I never want to let the fact that I can't remember their name stop me from acknowledging the person. I see you, you are here, the head nod, the smile. If I can offer any type of encouragement and it's appropriate, I like to do that. So I think that's probably the most basic human respect, is to just acknowledge that other people are there, and it's visual. Sometimes it's just, like I said, it's the smallest smile, it's the head nod, it's, respecting people for who they are and that they're there. And that's something that I think some people haven't mastered. I also don't ever appreciate people that, one of my pet peeves is condescending. Every person brings value, regardless of where they are in life or what stage or what kind of a day they may be having. They're still a person. And I think it's very important to respect people as they show up and who they are in that moment to the best of our ability. Because if we're not able to be our best,
Mm.
it can happen to all of them. And when people aren't able to be their best, I believe in giving grace.
Mm. I love it. Thank you. Let's stay with that first piece and then we'll get to the condescending. What you just sparked for me is one of my favorite data points. I love quoting like big, McKinsey and Gartner and Gallup and all that, but this comes from Oprah. Oprah Winfrey on her last episode of the 25-year show. It's very hard to even find, but I found it. It's a 45-minute monologue of her basically sharing her wisdom of all the interviews she's done. Here's what she said that ties with your point. She said, I've interviewed over 30,000 people on this stage over 25 years, from the top celebrities to average everyday people. Every single one of them had one thing in common: validation. Do you see me? Do you hear me? Does what I say matter? Literally, she would say that every one of them, from the biggest names in the green room at the back, would say, how do I do? How do I show up? So that's it. It's such a human need. And then, yeah, let's talk about condescending. Say more about that. How do you know it when it's happening, and what's the impact on you when somebody behaves that way?
Well, one of the things that I hope you don't, I never like to lead with this, but I am fairly well educated. I finished my doctorate. And one of the things that I see a lot of, I showed up early in my career, is when people would use big words to try to make other people feel small and make themselves appear. And so it's not really the words, it's the reason they use the words to try to act like they were smarter, more intelligent, more important. And it's a huge pet peeve of like, it's just not productive. I take it as basically a very strong negative, because an intelligent person can have a conversation with anyone. You learn to adjust the messaging to the audience as to what's, it's not like watering it down. Like, what is the point of having a conversation if we're not on this? You know what I'm saying? If you can't follow it, it's a waste of my time, effort, and energy. No. And the intent of actually burning energy on my part to make someone else feel small is just despicable, to the point where I almost never lead with my education, because I found so many people with the education rely on it and use it as a derogatory, I'm better than you.
Well, let's connect that with the see me, right? That, to me, what you're describing, the way I'm hearing you, is desperate need to be seen. And that those titles, or even power differential in an organization and titles and all of that means anything. I don't think it does, especially right now. The world's really changing. And in fact, let me test this with you, Brooke. With all of that knowledge and wisdom you've gained, wouldn't you say that there's actually a burden of responsibility with what you carry, with because you bring so much to things?
Honestly, probably I don't feel that much different than anybody else. I feel very privileged to have been in a situation where I was supported by my family and later my husband to pursue it. honestly, I think the difference between me and others is I had the support and the opportunity to finish something they may not have. I
Yeah,
was talking to my boss today and she was like, it's so great that you get to participate in sports. I wish I would have. I'm like, Karen, you didn't have the opportunity.
yeah.
It wasn't presented to you. It's not, you know what I'm
Oh,
saying? I
that's
just
beautiful. I
feel
get it.
people
Yeah.
have different kind of intelligences. What some of the most intelligent people I've ever met couldn't read, but they were somehow able to function and hide it from everybody.
Oh,
That
wow.
are you tracking with me? It's a different level. And this person I'm thinking of was working on airplanes, which is kind of scary, but people loved him and liked him so much. They just found another job that he could do that wasn't dangerous because he had such a way of connecting and people loved him and they protected him. And ultimately, what they did was they found a safe place for him to contribute to the work that we were doing. Had he been a jerk, it wouldn't have worked. So he was
Correct.
brilliant in my perspective. It's just that I've had an opportunity to do things that maybe some others haven't. So I wouldn't say I don't feel privileged. I just it's not a big deal to me. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah, no, no, I love it. Thank you for defining that and describing it. Not so much privilege, but what I say by responsibility is like, you know what you know, and how you carry yourself with that. And then actually, let's go here if you may.
Let me interject this.
Yeah,
I'm a firm believer it's a little cliche, but people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's probably
yes.
more me is I first want people to know I care about them and why I'm sharing what I'm sharing. And
Yeah.
that matters more than what. Does
No,
that
no,
make
and
sense?
that's at the heart of the respect quotient. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Like, you know, can we may often people at work and in life have differences. But are we going to walk away from that difference, or are we going to have confrontation and get really ugly about it? Or can we do it your way? Which is, you know, I love that example with that individual you described because, you know, it's sort of truly the human aspect of what we teach in L&D around, oh, you know, you can do Strength Finder and all that stuff. But really, the rubber meets the road when you take the time as a
Mhm.
manager, as a leader, to really understand an individual. And of course, there has to be that intersection with where they would bring value to the business. It's not one or the other, it has to be both. But sometimes that takes time, you know, and so to have that patience and humility to just navigate that. Yeah, yeah. Let's go to staying with respect. What do you do when you don't have that in a team or environment, and how do you navigate that?
Honestly,
Actually, sorry, let me make it a little
okay.
tighter because that's wide team with an individual. Let's stay with yeah, with
Mhm.
a individual when you're feeling like, boy, I'm just not feeling respected. What do you do? What happens for you?
Good day or bad day.
Yeah,
On my best days, I like to, it depends on the value of the relationship.
yeah,
Okay. So there was a particular coworker I had back in the day, and we had a personality clash legendary. All right. It was just really not working. And almost immediately after we had a big blow up, we got paired on a project. Then we had to go facilitate together in front of like, and I think that's what happened. And then we got put on another project. And I really just kind of sat her down and I was like, look, we have our differences. I respect that. You kind of intimidate the crap out of me, to be really honest, but we have a shared goal as well. And I want to make sure that for purposes of our shared objective, you know where I stand and that you can count on me to deliver. And, I'm just kind of putting it out there. So on my best days, I like to have a crucial conversation and
yeah,
really like invite people to be open with me so that we can work through it, because it's very difficult to address what you're not aware of. And sometimes what's causing the rift is unintentional.
yeah,
And if that's the case, it can be very easy to fix once you're aware of it. But like to assume that people know, I just like to take the off chance that they're not and give them the opportunity. If I tell you what you're doing is not well received, how it impacts me and you still choose to do it, then I can be mad. But I feel like at first I owe you the courtesy of at least bringing it to your attention so you have the opportunity.
yeah, yeah. And what I'm hearing, Brooke, is
And I
sharing.
like to have as good of a relationship with people as they will allow me to have. If it's going to be a detrimental relationship, I distance and I have a transactional, and I avoid unnecessary interaction that is not absolutely required. Sometimes I'll go to, maybe it's email or messaging instead of conversation because I don't like the directions that the conversations go. So I try to find a playing field where we can get the objective done or do what we need to do without limiting deliverables. But I'm not going to spend as much time with that person if I don't have to.
Thank you so much. As you know, listeners are listening to you. I imagine almost all of us are going to relate to what you just said, right? I think we all do that. Good for you to identify in that example you gave that you are going to have that crucial conversation and go there. We're not going to get through the respect quotient in this call, but really, that's the intention. It's a
But it's scary.
facilitated intervention where both sides get to be heard, not right or wrong, but we don't take the time in this fast-paced work world we live in globally now, and all the guardrails around, differences and all, things that topics that are just off the table. My intention with the framework is for people to actually have those deeper conversations without looking to change anybody and without being right or wrong, right? It's not about taking sides, it's about just being heard. And then maybe the RES is that conversation piece on both sides of two individuals, and then the BECT is the action steps, right? Like, can we find a place, like in that, back to your example, when you had that conversation with this peer, let's go there actually. How did she respond? Let's
She
take
was
it.
blown away. But the conversation that led to that, she literally slammed books down on the desk and walked out.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it was hostile. And what had happened was, in my intention to support, it came off wrong.
Yeah.
She couldn't handle it and she needed out. And
Yeah.
so we ended up there. And then we had to continue on and partner together. And it was challenging. But when we got on the next assignment, I was like, I can't do this. I need to definitely open the door to establish at least a more respectful relationship because we have to partner together and set some guidelines. And I apologize for my portion of that. Let her know the type of relationship I wanted to have. And I invited her to
Yeah.
tell me what I needed to do to support that. And what was really worked about that is I felt that I had set it up to have the best possible outcome. And if they chose not to, at least I did my part. I can't judge the success of the conversation on the results, but at least I knew that I humbled myself. I came in, laid out what I would like to have, and we're friends to this day, to be honest.
Oh,
I mean,
fantastic. I can so see that exactly because you put it out there. By the way, the other thing that's coming up for me as you're speaking, I'm a big fan of, I bet SBI, right? Situation, behavior, impact, the feedback framework we all use.
I've done similar things. I'm not familiar with
Okay.
that exact model.
Yeah, yeah.
The see do get model kind of comes to mind, which sounds very similar.
Yeah, basically, I mean, it's feedback with power differential. So it's usually a manager giving feedback to a direct report of this is what happened, this is the behavior I observed, here's the impact you had on me,
Mhm.
on the team, and then here the person on what's the impact on you. Why that framework comes to mind with what you're saying is I often teach and tell people that you have to add a big I in the beginning, which is intent. That's what you just laid out in that example.
Intent trumps content. It's not what you say, it's why you say it.
Exactly. And so you set that intent, you brought her guard down so that she could really hear you, and then it transformed the relationship. That's exactly it. What a lovely example. The objective here is to share this with the world. So what else would you like to share around your experience with respect
I'd like to talk a little bit about the respect question on the survey because I was absolutely blown away by, because some of the groups I would work with that would have low scores on respect, and I said, okay, I have a vision of what is respectful and what is not. Talking
Yeah.
over people, spitting on people, not inviting them to meetings. This is what I envision when I think you're disrespectful, or maybe taking credit for somebody else's work, or things of that nature. And I said, but what I'm looking to understand in the focus group is, what were you thinking of when you rated? What does that mean to you? And it was very broad. It was almost every person kind of had their own definition. Some of it was like they don't say good morning to me when they come in. I'm like, well, maybe they're introvert. Not that your feelings are not valid, but like, okay, we don't know that that was intentional, but like, but that would set someone off. Someone else said, well, people leave the company and they don't tell me. So I'm emailing, waiting for a response. I don't get the out of office because I sent it prior to, and nobody had the courtesy to tell me. There was a lot of little finite wrongs. What I found was the common theme is it was often a lack of communication, that people were very hurt, and sometimes when they're hurt they don't have the skill sets, the capacity, or the desire. Because right now I kind of think you did it on purpose, but maybe you didn't, and I can sit here with that, right? But if I come and ask you and you say you're darn right I left you out, then I got to deal with that, and that could be even harder. So I think it's a lack of skill sets, a fear of further disrespect. And I've been incredibly disrespected, and I have a pretty resilient personality. This is funny. You can do with this what you want, but in my younger days, I worked in an aircraft facility, right? It was shop floor. And when I would walk to one hangar, the workers on the floor would whistle at me. And in my professional capacity, this was very uncomfortable and awkward for me. So I went to address it with the director of the area. And I sat down and I said, hey, this is what's happening. And it's making me very uncomfortable. And would you believe, Bobby, he looked me in the eye and he said, you don't have a problem when they whistle. You have a problem when they stop whistling. And I said, this is the last time you will see me in your hangar. If you want to talk to me, you know where to find me. Thank you. And I walked out. So my point is that you don't always have a good outcome. Additionally, in the environment I was in, it would not have been a career builder to go to HR. My best option was to use my own resolve to set boundaries and keep an open eye for other people that might need support in sending boundaries, because I was definitely in the minority and I wanted to make a difference and have an impact. And as long as I didn't get put in that situation, and they knew um sort of like where I was sitting, it was okay. But I've had to stand up for myself.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But having to set those boundaries. So I'm very aware that just because you're brave enough to address it doesn't always mean you're going to get an outcome. I left with an outcome that was even worse in a tougher decision,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a valid fear. And I think people watch what happens to others and then they decide if they're going to be brave enough to have a conversation.
Yeah, Brooke, wow. And really, again, a bit cliche, but of course, this topic is around our personal values, right? And I often ask the question is, what's that deal breaker? Kind of like in a marriage, right? What would have you say goodbye? I'm done. I'm walking out of here. And, I think each of us have a different,
Well, and timing, right? I
yeah,
mean, what is it, in some cases, the job market is very tough right now. People might be, as long as you're not asking me to do anything unethical, my priority is to provide for my loved ones, and therefore that's where the line is.
yeah.
Other people might be mental health or other capacities. So I think you're right, and I think it changes from situation to situation, life stage. um I think we
No,
have to
no,
be
you're
honest
right.
with
But
ourselves.
let's go there actually. It's so timely that, the pendulum has shifted, that it is an employer market right now, almost globally. And there can be a C-suite mentality on like, great, we don't need to worry about measuring employee
Well, they
engagement.
think they're doing great because people aren't leaving. They can't fathom that it might, because there's nowhere to go and people need income. Wait till the market shifts. That's what I'm rooting for. I'm
Well,
rooting for the
not just
market to
that,
shift.
but that's the other end of the pendulum. The reason I think this ties with respect is if you're respectful, if you believe in the concept of respect the way you've been defining it, Brooke, and you're a C-suite leader, then you do it regardless because
100%.
your
I mean,
brand is, tied to whatever happens. The time
and
keeps shifting, change is constant. We know that the world is full of VUCA, volatility, complexity,
uncertainty, yes.
right?
One
All
of
of
the
that.
things,
That's always present. So that's, I think the call to action here is how do you stay the course? How do you do those investments that despite the environment, despite the fear, despite the tightening of belts, that you do the right thing.
It starts with what's in your circle of influence. Put a lot of pressure on me to walk the walk. I literally had someone, call me out one day and say, well, that's nice, but it doesn't work in real life. And I was able, I don't know how it came up, but I had a situation where my now 14-year-old son, who can swim like a fish, had actually had a drowning experience in swim lessons. And they're like, this doesn't work. I was like, yeah, it does. Because let me tell you a story about when I had to have a really difficult conversation in a very emotional life or death moment. And I needed to find out what actually happened, not go in there and tell them what I thought. I had an objective where I needed to understand so I could figure out how to move forward and help my son through a very challenging situation. And, they were all crying by the end and they were now believers. I have to believe in the concepts that I'm teaching. I have to try them out. I have to know that it's successful and it can work. Do I always hit it perfect? No. I usually tell them the difference between me and you is I can reflect back and figure out where I messed up. And I have the skills to go back and think about what I would do different. And sometimes the opportunity to, when people don't have the skill set that, they just react. And I think it's, sometimes they want to, but they don't know how. And so that's when I see people passive aggressive. I've never seen it be effective, but more often than not, I see people unskilled and unsure. And oftentimes they haven't, if the right behavior was modeled, but they didn't know what they were looking at, to recreate that is challenging.
And the confidence to feel, take the risk and try it, right? To put on those training wheels. This has been wonderful. We could stay here. I think it feels like much longer, but any parting words for our audience, your wisdom as we close on respect?
I think just thank you for listening, taking the time to even, ponder on this. I think everybody that's hearing it has at least that initial desire to try to improve in this area, and I applaud that. And every day is a new day. Every day is a new opportunity and a person to touch, and you never know what a difference that small interaction, that smile might make. And life is just too short not to make the most of our relationships, and respect is the core. It's like air. You don't know how important it is until it's not there. And I would put respect in that same category.
Wow.
It's great until it's gone. But when it's gone, you can think about nothing else.
That's a quotable, Brooke. I'm going to quote you on that. Thank you. It's so powerful. I know, I totally get it. I mean, it's like going through my body. I absolutely get it. Thank you so much. It's been an honor.
Well, Bobby, I know we have a lot we didn't get to, so I'm going to leave the invitation
I know.
open. If you
Thank
come to a point where you need it, please don't hesitate to tap back into me and let me know how I can further support you.